The story I'm about to tell you is about a 19-year-old boy named Kadin Black. On Sunday, December 18th, 2022, Kaden was supposed to head over to his dad's place to help take care of their dogs, like he did every Sunday. But for some reason, he never showed up and just seemed to have vanished into thin air. When Kaden didn't arrive, his dad Maurice called up their neighbor, Chris Faust, to ask if he had seen his son, since Kaden had been crashing with him for a bit. But Chris was like, no, Kaden's probably just sleeping upstairs. So Maurice didn't make a big deal out of it and just went on with his day. Now fast forward to Tuesday, and Chris realizes he hasn't actually seen Kaden since Saturday afternoon. So he decides to call Kaden's mom, Kara, to see if maybe he'd gone over to her place without telling anyone. But Kara says she hasn't seen Kaden either and last talked to him about 6 days ago. At this point, Chris is all out of options, so he calls the local cops to report Kaden missing. But here's the crazy part. It's been over a year and a half, and despite the police doing everything they can, Kaden is still nowhere to be found. It's got everyone wondering what the heck happened to this kid, and more importantly, who's responsible for his disappearance. Hello strangers, welcome back to the Strange Bar and Grill. Today we'll be looking at the strange disappearance of Kadin Black. Kaden was born on December 10th, 2003, to his parents, Maurice Black and Kara Patterson. He also had two brothers, Jordan and Carter. They all lived in this small town called Wrightsville, Pennsylvania. Growing up, Kaden was just this awesome kid. His mom described him as one of a kind, with a laugh that could brighten anyone's day. And it wasn't just at home. Kaden spread joy all over the community. His teachers loved him, and he even mowed lawns for his neighbors. The local kids looked up to him like a big brother. So it's safe to say, Kaden's kind and selfless personality was a huge part of what made him so great. Now, like any other family, they had their issues. Kaden's parents split up in 2007, but it didn't seem to bother him too much, since his dad only lived a short distance away in the same small town. Kaden worked hard in school too. His brother Carter said during football practice, Kaden always had his teammates' backs and would stay late to help them with drills if they needed it. So things were looking really bright for this kid. Many thought he'd go on to do big things in life, but according to his mom, Kara, Kaden had these moments of depression and anxiety that would make him lose his head from time to time. And it got worse in 2019 when his mom got a promotion at work, which meant that the family had to pack up and move to Maryland. Unfortunately, this forced Kaden to leave his friends and extended family behind. During this time, it was clear that Kaden was really unhappy, so much that he asked his mom if he could move back to Wrightsville to live with his dad. He just couldn't handle being away from his friends any longer. So in November of 2021, he packed up his things and headed back to Pennsylvania, where he reunited with his old life. But even though Kaden's mental health seemed to improve at first, he quickly realized living alone with his dad had its own challenges. As time passed, his behavior seemed to become more and more unstable, and according to his mom, Kara Patterson, around this time, Kaden had been diagnosed as bipolar. Kaden also had oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD for short, and is on the autism spectrum. For some reason, he got into a heated argument with a school bus driver, which ended with the cops being called. So just after 10 months of living with his dad, Kaden impulsively decided to move out again. This time he went to live with a close friend, Ethan, and the rest of the Faust family. Soon after, he got a job working for a moving company. But even though Kaden claimed he was innocent in the bus driver incident, the court proceedings still moved forward. He was scheduled for a hearing in January 2023, where he planned to defend his actions that day. But that court date would never happen because the month before, something went down that would bring chaos to the small town of Wrightsville and leave his friends and family absolutely devastated. On Saturday, December 17th, the 19-year-old told Chris Faust he was heading out for the night and didn't know when he'd be back. Since Kaden had recently graduated and was a somewhat responsible young adult, Chris didn't pry and just told him to be safe and have a good time. Kaden left at some point that evening, but because he decided to stay out late, No one in the house could confirm what time he actually got back. They were already asleep. As far as Chris knew, Kaden had probably come home in the early morning hours and was catching up on some much needed rest. So he didn't feel the need to check on him. In Chris's words, it wasn't unusual for Kaden to go out all night, come home, sleep all day, and repeat. But it wasn't long before Chris got a call from Kaden's worried dad, Maurice. Apparently, Kaden was supposed to come over that morning to help with the dogs, like he did every week. But for some odd reason, he never showed and wasn't answering his phone. Given the situation, Chris explained that Kaden was most likely sleeping upstairs since he had been out the night before. Maurice didn't want to start an argument with his son, so he just accepted that he wasn't coming and went about his day as usual. But little did Chris know, his assumption couldn't have been further from the truth. On Tuesday, December 20th, Kaden's mom, Kara Patterson, got a call that morning from Chris Faust. He was starting to get worried about her son's safety because he realized he hadn't actually seen Kaden since Saturday night. That meant Kaden had been gone for almost 3 days straight. Running out of options, Chris decided to call Kara to see if maybe Kaden had gone to her place without telling anyone. But to his surprise, Kara said she hadn't seen Kaden either. The last time she spoke to him was about 6 days prior when they were making plans for their Christmas get-together in Maryland. At this point, it's unclear who made the next call, but it's assumed that Chris Faust then reached out to Delta A1. That's the moving company where Kaden had recently started working. Chris knew Kaden was supposed to be on the job that week, and given that he was new there, he hoped Kaden would have definitely showed up. But once again, the company said they also had not seen or heard from Kaden. He had failed to show up for his shift on Monday, and he was already late for his Tuesday shift. With nowhere else to turn, Chris decided to call the local police department to officially report Kaden as missing. On Wednesday, December 21st, the Lower Windsor Township Police Department responded to a call made by a concerned guardian the day before. This guardian claimed that a teenager he'd been looking for after the past few months had been missing for 4 days, and he was worried for his safety. Given how out of character this was for Kaden, the police took the case very seriously right from the start. In fact, according to the chief of police, Jim Thomas, he had actually been Kaden's track coach in high school. He said everybody knew Kaden and got along with him, so there was an immediate feeling of suspicion as soon as the case began. The detectives decided to interview the family to see if they could gather any useful leads. After speaking to Chris Faust, they uncovered that about 2 weeks before he disappeared, Kaden had started working for the Delta A1 moving company. This detail sparked their interest. But there's more. The detectives had also been talking to Kara, who mentioned that Kaden had visited a co-worker's home in the days leading up to his disappearance. So after Kaden vanished, she went to Pennsylvania and to the home Kaden had been to. According to the man who answered the door, he didn't know who Kaden was and had no idea where he could be. With this information, the police thought it would be useful to go to this home as well to see if this person could provide any more insights into the case. But after asking the man who lived there if he had any information about Kadin Black, he once again simply said he didn't know who Kaden was and couldn't provide any useful leads. Although their suspicions towards this person remained, the police realized they had no probable cause to question him further, so they were forced to look at other angles, which led them back to Chris Faust, Kaden's guardian and landlord at the time, since he seemed to be the last person to see him. When they interviewed Chris, he told them the same story that he had during the previous conversation. He explained how Kaden had gone out Saturday evening and that he was unsure if he actually returned that night. Not wanting to walk away empty-handed, the police politely asked Chris if they could search the house for any evidence. Right away, Chris agreed and allowed them to conduct the search that same day. However, after searching the property inside and out, the detectives uncovered a key detail that would add yet another layer of mystery to this already puzzling missing person case. On Friday, December 23rd, the Lower Windsor Township detectives obtained a warrant to access Kaden's cell phone data. When they checked his recent activity, they discovered he had connected to the Faust's family Wi-Fi router on Sunday morning at approximately 9:33 a.m. Now, this piece of evidence is huge because up until then, no one knew for sure if Kaden had come home on Saturday night. But this discovery seemed to show that Kaden had returned and then left the house on Saturday morning. To further verify this new theory, the police asked the neighbors to check their security cameras to see if they could spot Kaden walking down the street. But to their surprise, after going through every bit of surveillance footage from that day, the detectives still couldn't confirm if Kaden had actually left the home that morning. If anything, this raised their suspicions towards the Faust family even more. If Kaden's cell phone was still in the house at 9:33 a.m. and there was no evidence showing that he had actually came home the night before, it seemed to suggest the possibility of foul play. But realizing they had been spending most of their time conducting interviews and chasing leads, the police decided to ramp up their search efforts. By now, it had been almost a week since Kaden was last officially seen. The concern surrounding his disappearance only grew more severe. Using Kaden's cell phone data again, they attempted to trace his last known whereabouts by checking the coordinates of the phone's most recent ping. But what they found out upon receiving the results left the entire police department scratching their heads. On Saturday, December 24th, about a week after Kaden was last seen, the Lower Windsor Township Police, now working alongside the York County Sheriff's Department, conducted an official search within a 5 to 6 mile radius of where Kaden's cell phone had last pinged. According to the chief of police, they performed air, land, and water searches with the help of many local organizations and agencies that specialize in search and rescue efforts. But despite their attempts to uncover more information, nothing significant was ever found, leaving the authorities no choice but to go back to the drawing board. A detective named Scott James from the York County Attorney General's office came forward to say he found the case to be incredibly puzzling. During this time, the town of Wrightsville had experienced incredibly bad weather, with the local river being frozen over. This negated any real possibility that Kaden could be in there. Basically, one night he's in the house, and the next morning he's not. Detective James added, "We don't have anything pointing specifically to foul play, but we also don't have anything specific about any sort of accident either. It's just a big question mark." But determined not to give up, the authorities, working alongside Kaden's friends and family, continued to search throughout the cold winter and follow up on any leads that they could find. Unfortunately, despite their persistent efforts, Kaden still wasn't found, leaving his family heartbroken and desperate for answers. However, just when everyone thought the case had gone cold, an extremely interesting piece of evidence emerged, once again pointing the finger of blame at none other than Chris Faust. On Sunday, June 25th, about 6 months after Kaden was first reported missing, a post was made to the Facebook Marketplace by none other than Chris Faust. He had decided to take it upon himself to sell Kaden's Toyota 4Runner to the highest bidder. According to Kara Patterson, Chris tried to claim that he had previously contacted her to try to sell it to her for $7,000, but this proved to be a lie. Kara revealed that no such conversation ever took place. If it had, she would not have allowed Chris to make that sale. Chris's argument was that he had sunk thousands of dollars into improving the vehicle's performance, and given that the car was technically under his name for insurance purposes, he had every right to sell it if he wanted. However, it appears Kara was furious to say the least. Not only did Chris sell the vehicle without her permission and block her on Facebook, but he also decided not to donate any of the money to the GoFundMe page set up to aid in the search for Kaden. With this extremely suspicious activity, the police once again set their sights on Chris Faust. The evidence was beginning to stack up against him, and without any persons of interest, he had become the most likely suspect. However, despite another round of questioning, Chris maintained his innocence, explaining that he needed the money for personal reasons and had every right to do whatever he wanted with the vehicle that was in his name. Unfortunately, after the authorities exhausted even more resources to further investigate the case, their efforts proved fruitless yet again, leaving the town of Wrightsville heartbroken. Despite their prayers, Kaden would continue to remain a missing person, as he does to this day. Now, as far as the official investigation goes, this is all we know for now. But despite the rather bleak circumstances, Kaden's family continues to post about the case as often as they can on the Find Kadin Black Facebook page. They've been asking the public for help during this incredibly difficult time. Kaden has now been officially missing for over a year and a half at the time of this recording. Given this fact, alongside the incredibly worrying circumstances surrounding his disappearance, I can't help but feel that the likelihood of his safe return grows weaker with each passing day. So with that, let's get into some potential theories here. So to kick things off, I wanted to start by looking into one of the more positive theories that has come out of this investigation, probably also the least likely theory, that Kaden could potentially still be alive out there somewhere. So I would like to believe that Kaden is maybe out there in hiding somewhere. Chris Faust mentioned that Kaden had been acting strange in the weeks leading up to his disappearance, so perhaps he was struggling with his mental health again and just wanted to get away and start a new life. His mother, Kara, did mention in an interview that Kaden suffered from episodes of depression from time to time and had bipolar issues. And given the fact that he had just started a new job and he would also be heading into court in the new year to fight assault charges, you could understand if he felt like he was under an extreme amount of pressure. Also, Kaden had tried to live with his mother, his father, and even his friend, so maybe this recent attempt to find a home was proving to be a failure once again, and he decided the best course of action would be to move away entirely, leaving behind his old life in the process. However, this theory sounds super far-fetched. To do something so outrageous was not the usual behavior for Kaden, and despite the problems he had with his family, he loved them deeply and would never leave them behind without so much as saying goodbye. Could Kaden potentially be out hiding somewhere? I don't know, but I did see a post made by Kara who stated that the Fausts have a family property in a rural area some hours away from Wrightsville, and she finds it very curious as to why the police haven't found a good enough reason to search this second property. Surely there could be a possibility that if he did run away or someone was hiding him, he could be at this second property. But again, it's very unlikely that this would be the case. I don't believe Kaden would be hiding out for over a year. But if the Fausts did something to Kaden, whether it was cold-blooded murder or maybe they got into an argument and somehow Kaden ended up dead, could he be buried at the Fausts' rural property? It's a possibility. The police haven't searched this area. There could be clues out there. Also, what about the impending felony charges? Could the incident with the school bus driver that Kaden experienced a few months before he went missing have in some way been connected to his disappearance? Well, as I mentioned earlier in this video, Kaden had actually been summoned to attend a court-appointed hearing in January of 2023 to contend these charges for assault, as he felt he was acting in self-defense. And according to Kara Patterson, there was some camera footage of the incident that she has physically seen herself. In it, Kaden was asked to go back to his assigned seat after switching seats and refusing to listen to orders. Apparently, the bus driver then proceeded to pull over on Route 30, demanding that Kaden get off the bus onto the busy highway. But when Kaden refused, the bus driver then grabbed and ripped out some of Kaden's hair, to which he then reacted by defending himself against what he felt like was an attack. In Kara's opinion, there is no excuse for how that bus driver reacted to Kaden's defiance of assigned seating, and she is unsure why the bus driver was not reprimanded or charged as well. She also added that she fully believes the school district needs to be held accountable for the poor handling of the incident. So based on what Kara states, it would seem that Kaden was very confident that he was going to win his court case, especially given the fact that there was camera footage proving he was innocent. With this in mind, could it be possible that the bus driver may be a suspect? Well, it's plausible, but is it likely? I don't think it's likely, but there's a chance it was the bus driver, but I'm sure it was Chris Faust. If the bus driver anticipated that he was about to lose his job and potentially be charged for attacking a school student, perhaps he felt pressure into making Kaden disappear to protect himself. Now, this is, of course, speculation, and there's absolutely zero evidence to back up this story. I do think it's interesting that Kaden would disappear just 1 month prior to the court case, as well as the fact that Christmas was right around the corner and he had made plans to stay with his family back in Maryland. Despite this huge wealth of evidence that the authorities and the family have been able to uncover so far in this investigation, we're still no closer to finding out what really happened to Kadin Black. So I truly hope that some more evidence gets uncovered soon, as I can only imagine the desperation that Kaden's family is feeling right now. But what do you all think? What's your theory on what happened to Kaden?